represents courage, um, solidarity, and perseverance. So that is why purple is a color, and you'll see that throughout our presentation. And then I will turn it over to Marshall, and it's an honor to be here.
Thanks, Angelina. Welcome, everybody. My name is Marshall Hamilton. Again, I'm the Executive Director for the Safe Family Justice Centers, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Um, Thank you. So this is just a quick quote we wanted to share just about the impacts of violence and just dysfunction in general. It very much is a generational cycle. It impacts every area of somebody's life. And anytime that we can interrupt that cycle, we are effectively interrupting that cycle for generations to come. Slide, please. Thank you. So we like to describe the services that victims, at least I do, as a web of services, because oftentimes victims can get caught in that web. And so when a victim is, or when somebody is victimized, we're often forcing them into certain systems, right? So we're engaging them with service providers like, us here at SAFE and Angelina over at Shelter and the DA's office and all of these other service providers, rape crisis centers that may want to assist them, as well as law enforcement interactions, any kind of legal ramifications from that incident, as well as county systems like Child Protective Services, their public benefits, the school system. Their basic needs are all up kind of in the air during that time. They could be facing stability issues with finances, their employment, access to transportation, even access to faith-based services. And then they can theoretically be in all four court systems all at the same time. And those court systems aren't designed to talk to each other. And I think in general, we don't really want them to talk to each other, but it presents these issues for people at the start of that victimization process that puts them in the web of all of these different service providers, all trying to access them all for different reasons, all at the same time. And so really what the experience for many folks is a lot of overwhelm, not just from the crime or the victimization itself, but also from all of these service providers that are activated when that occurs, right? Everybody has a different role, and we all try to do that role at the same time, which can often overwhelm survivors. Excellent, thank you. Just a couple of things that we wanted to clear up for the general discussion points, right, is that anywhere between 30 and 50% of domestic violence incidents are reported. And so when we look at the overall impact of domestic violence, the things that we're going to talk about today are things that we've seen from that 60 to, that percentage that's reported, but there are so many people experiencing violence that never get reported, never get involved in any kind of system. And we really are talking about a large portion of the population. It's one in 4 men, I believe. And when we look at those numbers, it's really just, if we're talking about the 50 people on this call, there's a likelihood that a number of us have experienced some domestic violence in our lifetimes. Most at risk are going to be women ages between the ages of 18 and 24. That young adulthood period is quite dangerous, and just we're all learning about ourselves and about people in our general area, and so those are the folks most at risk for violence. And then 1 in 15 children are exposed to domestic violence each year, and 90% of those children are eyewitnesses to the violence. So if we're talking about the impact of domestic violence, again, those ripple effects, it's very often affecting our children in a very negative way. And the most dangerous time for domestic violence victims is the 12 months after they leave a violent situation. So oftentimes we think, we've gotten them out of that situation, they're safer. And in reality, they're actually in the most dangerous period of that violent relationship the minute they step foot out of it. And so 75% of the homicides related to domestic violence occur after a victim tries to leave that relationship. And when we talk about abuse, we're talking about a multitude of different areas in which it can be impacted. And oftentimes we hear things about the physical side, emotional and verbal is coming to the general consensus. as being recognized as violence as well. But we also have things like spiritual abuse, economic abuse, a lot of financial abuse, sexual abuse, institutional abuse as well, and cultural abuse. Oftentimes, abusers are using their culture as a way to dominate that relationship and provide power over somebody else. And so when we're looking at domestic violence, it not only does it affect all of these areas, it can start in any one of those areas as well. Um, so it's really something to be mindful of, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to recognize it as well. This is the power and control wheel, is what we call it. There's also an equity wheel on the flip side of this, but abuse happens in so many different ways. And so all of the different types of abuse that we just talked about can occur simultaneously, can occur on their own, can be siloed. But oftentimes the power and control wheel can capture any type of that abuse. And so it's a reference tool that often is very visual and helpful for survivors. And you'll see it's on a little bit of a spectrum there. But using children is part of that, using isolation, that emotional abuse or intimidation that we talked about, as well as male privilege, which goes into partly about that cultural violence, right? Is typically the cultural aspects of domestic violence often involve male privilege or the patriarchal aspects of society. And when we talk about effects on victims, the cycle of abuse is another kind of visual tool that we use, but oftentimes what we will eventually be able to identify with a survivor is this roundabout cycle of abuse where oftentimes it's the relationship is going fine, and that's that calm phase. Everything's kind of quote unquote normal. And then a fight happens or some kind of tension begins to build. It could be economic tension, it could be a physical argument, could be an emotional stressor. Somebody loses a job or something like that, and then it starts to bubble up and eventually explode, which is that incident, right? So those are oftentimes, I think, what we think about domestic violence as is those incidents and that just that one part of the cycle. But the reason, and we'll kind of get to this as well, the reason that people stay in these relationships is because it is a cycle. It's not just an incident and then it's all bad from there. There's a reconciliation phase. The relationship goes back to being calm or peaceful. Sometimes it's better in that calm period than it's ever been. And so oftentimes the abusers will use this kind of cyclic behavior to wear down or to show their good side, right? And so we're dealing with survivors who are interfacing with their abusers, who they care about and who they love in those situations, that are only bad maybe 10%, 50% of the time, which is what makes it so hard to exit those relationships.
And thank you, Marshall. And in identifying and understanding that, people always ask, why don't they just leave? Why don't you just walk away from the relationship? It's just your boyfriend or your husband's beating you. You don't need to be there. But this, like we said before, statistically and in reality, it is the most dangerous time after a victim leaves because they have taken the power and control away from the abuser, and he feels or she feels threatened that they are no longer overpowering this person, and it can cause the person to retaliate in some of the most destructive ways that we've ever seen. Next slide. Some examples of why they leave or why they don't leave are many. I have a list of 150 most common used reasons, and some of them are simply they love their partner. And this relationship did not start out as abusive. They started out in a caring relationship, what they identified as I love this person and I want to spend the rest of my life with them, have children with them. But that love turned into abuse, which also falls into that Stockholm syndrome that many of us have heard about, where they identify with the abuser as being their protector and the only one that can take care of them. And they didn't mean to do it. They believe the threats. They know that person better than anybody else. So when that person says, I will end your life, they believe them. and they know they're capable of it. There's a lot of shame in staying in this relationship and a lot of shame in being in this relationship. So they don't want anybody to know. There are a lot of religious factors in there as well. We see it often in the LGBTQ community, where they will be outed by their partner because their family isn't aware. They have that lack of support. And a lot of times it is safer to stay because they know that when they're in that honeymoon stage, when things are calm, they know how to keep it there. But sometimes it doesn't stay there. And if there's children involved, they think it's in the child's best interest for me to stay. That's their father or that's their mother, and they deserve to have two parents. So there's a lot of factors involved in our economy and in our society today, financial abuse and lack of housing and where to go after. A lot of them are unaware of what resources are available to them, or that this is even a criminal offense and that there are resources out there to help them. And some of them believe the promises that they will change, it will get better, it'll never happen again. So those are some of the reasons why we see a lot of individuals staying behind or they're in complete and total denial. Um, and that's where we come in and we work with them on that. Next slide. A lot of them are experiencing what is called gaslighting, and this is a technique that is seen very often in domestic violence and workplace abuse relationships and situations, where they make them think that they are losing their sense of reality or sanity. Some examples of gaslighting are after a incident occurs and after an explosion occurs, they said, I would never hurt you. I did it because I love you. One of the other examples is, why are you doing this to me? It makes no sense why you keep doing things that make me have to get angry and lose my temper. It's your fault. Um, they tell other people, she's been going through a lot of different things. She's been really irrational lately and making up stories. I don't know, something's not right with her. So it makes you second guess yourself. The one that we hear a lot of is, you're just too emotional. You take things personally, but you must have been dreaming that that happened because you were the one that fell down the stairs. I never touched you. So gaslighting happens a lot and it causes a lot of doubt within the person that's being victimized. And they really don't think anyone's going to believe them because they're starting to doubt their own reality and their own sense of self and what's really going on. So gaslighting is a big issue. Next slide. A lot of them do know that they can get help and that they can call the police, but it's a last resort. And most of the time, they do not have law enforcement involved. But when they do it because they want the abuse to stop, because they can't get the perpetrator to stop abusing them. But they don't want them to get in trouble. They don't want them to get arrested. And they'll even tell law enforcement that I just wanted him to stop. I just wanted the argument to end, but please don't handcuff him in front of the children. Um, they're unable to control the situation. So they need a third party to come in. And a lot of times, why the police are called or why victims call the police is because it's out of their control. A neighbor heard some noise, one of the children called, and law enforcement got involved because somebody else made the decision that they were not safe. And they called in reinforcements. And then there's times that the victim just needs help and they will call. I think a lot of you have seen the 911 commercials and the different commercials where a victim calls 911 and orders a pizza. And they're like, you're calling 911. Like, yes, I do. I would like a pizza delivered to such and such an address. And all the 911 operators and dispatchers have been trained that if someone calls, to listen to what they're saying and ask a series of questions that will help them determine if this person is safe, and will send law enforcement out to do a wellness check. And they are to ask if there are weapons involved, to make sure that they're not sending law enforcement into an even more dangerous situation that they would also be injured. So those are some of the reasons that law enforcement is called, and a lot of times it's because a third party is calling the police. Um, when DV becomes criminal, on the next slide, is usually when there is a real sense of battery and danger. The former spouse or fiance or even current partner is being injurious. There's actually property damage. There's different penal codes that the police will follow, as well as um, the DA's office and the courts. And it has to fall under these categories for it to be either seen as a misdemeanor and possible imprisonment, or found guilty of a felony, especially when there is a traumatic injury or condition. One of the things that we see often is the strangulation, the stalking, the violation of the restraining orders and the court orders, and then the criminal threats. If they're breaking phones, if they're destroying property, if they're actually physically harming them, then it becomes criminal. And then it's again up to the judge and up to the officers to pursue it. And a lot of the times they drop the charges. But the biggest issue and the most dangerous is the lethality of some of these incidences. And strangulation is one of the ones we're going to focus on because we see it more often than not, more so than stalking and threats. Next slide talks a little bit more about strangulation and the lethality of it. What we do is we do a danger assessment with all of our clients when they call and when they're receiving their initial assessment and intake, to make sure that they are safe, to make sure we don't need them to go to the hospital and get examined. A lot of them will say, oh, well, he choked me, or he tried to strangle me, or he put his hands around me, around my neck, but it's okay, I'm fine. So we have to ask a series of questions to make sure they're okay. Like, did they lose consciousness? Were their bodily functions, did they lose control of their bodily functions? Or is there bruising? Do you have difficulty swallowing? Do you have a raspy voice? Are there certain things going on? And this danger assessment is available online, and it's one of the best that we've seen. And there is a scoring tool for it as well. But we do use this to make sure when they tell us that they are physically being abused and have experienced some type of choking or strangulation, that it isn't to the point of extreme danger and needing more medical attention. And this is the most lethal, because if not taken care of, they can lose their life as a result of a strangulation. Next slide. This is a little graphic, and we kind of put it down a little bit, but this talks about the 1 in 4 women that will be exposed to this in their lifetime. And 68% of them will experience near fatal strangulation by their partner. And I say she, and I don't mean to be that way. The majority of the people we serve in our program are women and women with children. We do have male victims that do come in. We see this more in the women, um, and in same-sex relationships, as well, where strangulation is a huge issue. And these are some of the signs to look for. This is just a very graphic way. Some people, depending on skin tone and the amount of melatonin in your body, you're not going to see the strangulation marks and the fingerprints and the things along those lines immediately. But pay attention to if you're seeing, the redness in the eye, the raspiness in their voice, their heart, their inability to swallow. These are things that we look for, and we immediately send them to the hospital to get a strangulation evaluation done to make sure that they are okay, because it doesn't take long for this to go into effect. And these can be fatal cases. So my apologies for the graphicness of the slide, but I think it's really important that we realize that this is happening, and a lot of it is being downplayed by the victim, because they don't realize that what happened was them being strangled and them almost losing their life. Um, Next slide. I think, Marshall, this will be yours.
Yeah. So I think, Angelina, what kind of what do we do to combat some of these things that we've now talked about, right? One of the most common services requested at the Family Justice Center is restraining orders. And there's so many different types, which I think is a misnomer for people. We think we can just apply for one, and there's one there. They all go through the judicial system at some point. Law enforcement has the issue, or the ability to issue restraining orders. Those only last 5 to 7 days. The family law court can issue restraining orders. The criminal court can issue restraining orders. The military can issue restraining orders, the same as our Native American tribal law enforcement. But oftentimes, each restraining order is very restrictive to what they cover, right? I guess for lack of a better word. So criminal protective orders, for example, only cover the actual victim that charges are being filed for. Um, Emergency protective orders only last 5 days, 5 to 7 days. Military protective orders are one of the most restrictive that I've seen. They only impact people who are active duty and on a base. So if you live off base, it doesn't help you. Or if the victim lives off base, but the perpetrator lives on base, it only accounts for the activities that happen on a military base. And it's typically issued by that abuser's commander. And so they actually have the ability to essentially turn on and turn off that restraining order based on their own judgment. Um, and we also have gun violence restraining orders, which are very specific to the presence of a weapon. It's not a protective order in the sense of it will protect you as a person. It's a removal of weapons and protection from access to weapons. And so there are so many different abilities in restraining orders to limit not only the protection that is available to victims, but also what the perpetrator can and cannot do. And oftentimes, victims have multiple restraining orders at a given time that all run out at different times. And so it can be sometimes really confusing for clients or for survivors, to identify what really their restraining order does protect them from, and what that may look like in a grocery store setting, or maybe at child custody exchanges and such like that. So restraining orders are very helpful, but they can be also very confusing. Next slide. I think one of the most important services that victim service providers offer in general is case management. And so case management can mean so many different things, but oftentimes it involves a needs assessment. We're really trying to figure out what is it exactly that's needed from this person. What are their goals? How do we make sure that they're talking to the right people, that they have the right resources? It also provides what we call like a timeout period. Often shelters will do this as well, as the 72 hours after a violent incident is a very vulnerable but extremely important time for survivors. Oftentimes that's the time when they're still upset from the incident, still feeling the pain from any injuries, are still in kind of that angry phase of their that cycle, right? So they're not quite into that reconciliation process yet. And that's oftentimes where we want to intercept and be helpful as service providers, because that's the time that we can help them step out of that cycle. It also helps identify a support team. And so when we talk about the different agencies that can be involved, that web of services, right? It helps us identify who's actively involved. And so for folks like Angelina and I, it helps us figure out like, okay, is shelter doing this and safe is doing this, and how do we get the survivor plugged in without overwhelming the survivor? And it helps us do long-term services. We want to provide support to survivors long-term to interrupt that cycle of violence permanently, hopefully, right? And so it really isn't a fast process. It's a healing journey that survivors go on. And so case management's vital to that healing process. Next slide. Thank you. We also have safety planning protocols, right? And so some of the basic things that we'll go over now, safety planning while at home, right? We want to avoid rooms with no exits. For some reason, I like to tell people, don't fight in the bathroom. It's a very common thing that you get backed into a corner. Don't fight in the bathroom. Don't fight in kitchens with knives and weapons. Make sure that there's an exit in that room, because it can diffuse an argument. And we want to talk about things like locking the abuser out of the home. How do you get somebody to an exit, right? Medical attention is really important. Identifying, if you do have contact with police, who that person was, what agency they were from, who they are, and then obviously keeping them aware of their resources, like the hotlines that are run in this county, as well as the national domestic violence hotline. And when we talk about safety planning with children, a whole nother layer of things come into play, right? We want to make sure children know how and when to call 911, making sure that neighbors are aware of kind of the very basic things that are happening so that your children are safe. Practicing safety plans, kind of like fire drills with children, right? How to call 911, who to call when you're maybe scared or upset. Um, Making sure children aren't actively involved in that incident. So having older siblings take younger siblings out of that room that the argument's happening in or the fight is happening in. And making sure that children don't get physically involved in that. So teenagers often like to try to interrupt that, right? And try to save or protect their parent, but that can be extremely dangerous for the child as well as the survivor in that situation. And technology is such a huge piece to safety planning. We have all of the things that help you find your keys are super dangerous to survivors. So air tags, tiles, all of the different tracking mechanisms in your Tesla and in all of your phones are super dangerous. We've seen survivors get locked out of their car when the abuser's nowhere near them, right? Because they have access to that little control button that makes it so easy to start your car. We've seen abusers turn on and off car alarms from miles and miles away. Track vehicles, turn them off, put those geofencing tags up, find your phone or your computer, or all of those things. Um, and so we talk to survivors about narrowing down how the abuser might have gotten that information. Is it only in your phone? Because then we know that maybe that phone is compromised. Did you tell a friend? Did you post it on social media? Social media has all of those geotagging features. So Instagram rolled out a map, Snapchat has a map, everybody has a map of how to find you. And that can be really dangerous to survivors and their children. Um, Changing account passwords, resetting phones, getting new phones, it can be really displacing for survivors because all of a sudden we're trying to get them access to new and quote unquote clean electronics because we don't know how this abuser is getting access to all of the things, what resources the survivor's tapping into and all of those things. And then being able to look at pictures, even pictures that you send are oftentimes tagged with a location. And so that can be extremely dangerous as well.
I saw a couple of questions in the chat about can you get more than one type of restraining order at a time, depending on the victim's situation or needs, and then also if they wanted a training or understanding these protective orders for our McKinney-Vento site liaisons who we would connect with. And I think, Marshall, you mentioned that you can have multiple restraining orders at one time, and then at the end we will share our contact information so that you can reach out to us about those trainings as well. So I did want to respond to those because I just happened to see them as I was unmuting. And I didn't want them to get lost in the introductions of people in the chat. So there are different types of, so thank you for those. Those are great. Um, you are welcome, everyone. There are very few domestic violence shelters in Riverside County. There's only two dedicated domestic violence shelter supportive services facilities designated in Riverside County. However, there are those in the surrounding areas. These shelters, their shelter locations themselves are confidential. Some of them do have barriers such as age limits for children, being able to take pets, substance abuse and mental health parameters, as well as transportation because they are few and far between. We're the only Shelter from the Storm is the only one in the Coachella Valley or serving the Coachella Valley area, which is a very large radius of services. We go from Bedding, Beaumont Path, all the way to Blythe. So transportation can be an issue for them to get to our safe location for pickup. The minimum stay can be 30 days. Ours right now is 60. And then transitional living options are limited as well due to funding and location. We've included the three closest shelters and their hotlines. There's also Unity Home in the High Desert area as well, which is part of San Bernardino County. But these are three of the main shelters. And of course, you can always call the national hotline to get them connected to other shelters in their area. So we did want to have a slide on that to let people know. And then there's alternatives to shelter, which is the next slide. We do encourage some of the clients that have transportation issues or are not comfortable with being in a shelter facility to connect with family and friends. Maybe they have a safe family or friend that they can go to and stay temporarily while they're dealing with the situation and then consider if shelter option is for them. Some of them do go to homeless shelters. There are a few of those within our county and community and surrounding areas. We do encourage them to apply for public benefits, and they do have homelessness assistance, hotel vouchers, and then if they want to relocate out of area or need other financial assistance, since we're unable to provide that on a regular basis, we do help them connect with California Victims Compensation Board, and there's an application and process for that so that they can get assisted with that relocation if a DV shelter is not an option that they are ready to pursue at this time. Next slide talks a little bit more about the California Victims Compensation Board, or CalVCB. We do help with that. We usually refer our clients to SAFE to help them with that because they have more advocates and liaisons that would be able to do the follow-up necessary for it. There is a maximum amount of reimbursement for the compensation. You do have to apply. There are some questions that they're going to ask you. It is something that does help the survivor really with just about anything. We had one client get new tires so that she could relocate to Arizona. We had another client have some remodeling done to their new apartment so that there was safety features involved, like alarms and phones and things along those lines. So there are some caveats to what is funded and what isn't, and the duration of time it takes for a response. But that is something that we do refer to State Family Justice Center for, simply because their advocates and liaisons can follow through better than our case managers in the short period of time they are with us. So we wanted to put that out there as a resource and information for you all, and we could definitely understand more. The next slide talks about coverage and the different things that CalVCV does provide assistance with, such as funeral and burial expenses. That is a reality that happens when domestic violence is involved in the case. Um, Loss of dependence due to injury, wage loss, medical expenses, treatment. We had one client get her teeth replaced, and it was covered by Cal VCB because it was extensive damage to her dentures. We also had somebody with some facial reconstruction assistance. Some veterinary fees for their animals was also covered because the animal was severely abused and was a very close family pet. It was almost like their child. So that was something that CalVCB was able to cover for them. So these are some of the things covered that they can apply for. And again, it's not guaranteed, but at least it is something that they can look into in more details on with that. So moving on to the next slide, I'm going to share a little bit more about Shelter from the Storm and the services that we provide and what we cover within domestic violence as an agency. Our hotline number is available 24/7. It is available in English and Spanish, so please feel free to share that with your clients. We do have a local number, which is 760-328-7233. And then our office number is the 0400, where they can call for information and other services. Next slide tells you a little bit about who we are. We have been in existence since March 17th of 1988. We have been around for a while. Again, we are the only domestic violence shelter in the Coachella Valley, serving Eastern Riverside County. Our mission is very simple. We're here to provide comprehensive services to victims of domestic violence. We want to be professional, ethical, and compassionate. That is our goal. That is our mission. Our vision is to make sure that we create a community where everyone lives free from the terror of domestic violence and empower them to build safe and healthy futures for themselves and their families. That is really why we are here. This is what we do. We focus on intimate partner domestic violence, which is IPV. We really serve mainly women and women with children, but we do have male victims and men with children that have been in our shelter or are receiving other comprehensive services with us. Next slide tells you a little bit more about our core values. We believe in safety, empowerment, respect, inclusivity, and professionalism. We're here helping survivors flourish after the storm. Our name is Shelter from the Storm because domestic violence can be a storm of activities, and a web of services is available to them, but they need someone to guide them through the storm. When you're in the eye of the storm, you can't see out. So we are the out to help them rebuild their lives. And these are the core values that we really focus on when we're trying to connect survivors with services and make sure that they are safe. Next slide. We have our 24-hour crisis hotline, which I shared with you before. It is available 24/7. We do have volunteers that help with the hotline. However, the majority of our hotline is answered by paid staff that are scheduled to work to make sure that the individuals, and I just saw a typo in our slide. That's okay. It's supposed to say services provided, so I apologize for that. We overlooked that when we put it together. But our hotline is available 24/7. We believe that our dedicated, professionally trained staff can answer any question that comes to them, and we want to make sure the people that call feel that they are getting their questions answered and the support they need, especially when they're not sure what they're looking for. We have our safe haven shelter, which is in a confidential location here in the greater Coachella Valley area. It's called the Mary L. Silver House. She was a very generous donor who believed that everyone deserved a right to a safe and comfortable home, and that is why our new home has been named after her. We also have our community counseling center, which is our main office and our business office, and that's where all of our clinical services are offered. And then we have our outreach services as well. Next slide. Like I said, our crisis line, we do have our local number, which is 760 number, because we are in the Coachella Valley, but there is also a toll-free number, 800-775-6055. Again, we are open 365 days a year, and we do help with safety planning, crisis intervention, and community resources. So it's not just the gateway to our shelter, it is also a resource line for callers. Next slide talks about how you can get help. If you are looking for other things other than shelter, you can call our counseling center main office at the 0400 number, and staff will answer and connect you to the right services and resources and tell you a little bit more about what we do and where you can get help. Next slide is just about the Marielle Silver House and what our little placard is. We are a safe haven crisis shelter. So we are anywhere from 30 to 60 days. It is not long-term sheltering. However, on a case-by-case basis, we can extend the stay. We do not discharge to the street. Next slide. There are some things that we want people to know and be aware of before they come in. We are a nonviolent environment, so we do not believe in any kind of physical discipline to the children. It is a supervised home. There is 24/7 staff. There are communal living spaces. They do share housekeeping and cooking chores, and there is a curfew every day for our residents. They do not leave during the day, but if they do, they have to be back by curfew, and the house is locked down for the night. It is an undisclosed location. It is confidential. Unfortunately, at this time, we are not able to take pets or service animals. We do not allow any active drug or alcohol usage. No cell phones or electronics are used while at the facility. We do have safety rules, and of course, no visitors. Their Aunt Tilly can't come and see them while they're in shelter. That's why it's confidential. So we like to let people know that so that they're aware, because they're like, well, they need to come see me. No, they cannot see you while you're in our program. This is not a hotel. This is a confidential shelter. Next slide talks about our community counseling services and the services we have available to you or to survivors. And so that you are aware of what the referral services are. Next slide talks a little bit more about our clinical services. We provide individual, I mean, you can go to the next slide, please. We provide individual one-on-one therapy, in-person sessions, as well as virtual. All initial assessments are in person. No exceptions to that rule. We need to see them physically and assess where they are before we can start virtual sessions. And even with virtual sessions, there are some rules and regulations to that as well. And we'd like to go over that with them in person for their safety and the safety of their children. We do provide support group, newcomer group, aftercare group, general peer-led support group, both in English and Spanish, and clinical-led support groups. We do offer DB 101 classes, general information classes. We have art therapy sessions and parenting classes, dependent on what is going on with the client and the number of participants that are in need of those support services. And those are also offered in shelter as well. Next slide. We do outreach, we do have special events and celebrations, community resources. We do have a panel of speakers that are volunteers, board members, staff. We do have survivors that come and share and do presentations similar to this. At different community venues, at events, just to provide more information and even to solicit support, monetary support for the agency. We do food, clothing, and essential item distribution as well. We have certain days of the month where people can come in and receive those items. And whenever they come in for services, if they let us know they have a need, we do have a space where they can come and get those items on a regular basis. Food is non-perishable food. We do not keep perishable food on site except for on shelter, but at our distribution, it is non-perishable food items only. Next slide talks a little bit about our contact information and who we are. Our main office is in Palm Desert. This is open to the public. Walk-ins are welcome. However, our doors are locked for safety reasons. So if they call first and let us know they're on their way and they need services, we can save them a trip. We are short-staffed. And understaffed at the time, just like many other places. So they may not get immediate assistance if they just walk in, but we do schedule their appointments. Again, our main office and counseling center is the 0400 number. Our hotline is available via toll free or our local number, and they are completely free, available 24/7 and answered both in English and Spanish. And our general email that is answered by rotating staff in administration and development is info@shelterfromthestorm.com. So that is our services in a nutshell. We do provide resources and assistance. So that is what I have. Excuse me.
Thanks, Angelina. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about safe family justice centers as well. So again, kind of similar to what Angelina just did, we're going to provide a little bit of an in-service presentation about who we are and what we do and all of that. So next slide. Safe Family Justice Center's mission is to provide those comprehensive services. I think that's a big thing with domestic violence survivors is you don't want to have to send them all over the county because the realistic option is they're not going to go, right? Because there's so many barriers to transportation. So comprehensive services, and then we have 3 pillars: protect families, seek justice, and promote safe futures for children. And the way in which we envision that happening is putting as many people in one space as humanly possible. So our family justice centers are considered one-stop shops. We try to put as many partners in our facilities as possible so that survivors only have to go one place to get the number of services they may need in the county. Next slide. Family justice centers are pretty common, particularly in California. We are Riverside County's only set of family justice centers. We operate 3 sites, one in Riverside, one in Indio, and one in Temecula. We have been operating since 1998. Since 2005 as a family justice center, but SAFE, and the acronym that we pull from, was a standalone nonprofit providing victims of domestic violence and their children's services. And so when we merged in 2019, we kept both names. But we've been providing services to the County of Riverside since 1998, primarily in the Southwest region. But now that we do have those 3 facilities and have since 2005, it's really important for us that anybody anywhere in the county can access services in their local area. So California has the most family justice centers operating throughout the United States. We have 26 throughout the state, with 5 more that I know of in development, 2 of which will be in San Diego County. So there are family justice centers throughout the US and internationally now, all with the same premise of providing those comprehensive services to victims of crime. Slide. Family justice centers have to serve 5 crime types, one of which, and the most prominent for us, is domestic violence. But we also service victims of child abuse, elder abuse, sexual assault, human trafficking, and then youth at risk, which we define as any child with more than one adverse childhood experience. So a child going through pretty much anything is eligible for our services so that their family can receive stability services, so that they're not then interfacing with violence, because we know that lack of stability typically leads to some form of abuse or violence, unfortunately. The goal of a family justice center and the purpose behind this essentially is defined in the penal code in California. Essentially, the main portion of it is that we're trying to put as many services and integrated services in one place. So it's not a shopping mall, but it's truly putting as many services in one place and all working together for those 5 crime types that I mentioned, all from one location with the main goal of 3 things: reducing the number of times a victim has to tell their story. So I don't want them to have to tell the story to me and then tell the story to Angelina and then tell the story to public benefits and then tell the story to the DA's office. We want to be able to get that story and then be able to use whatever the victim wants to share with us in that space and be able to be more effective in that way. We want to reduce the number of places victims have to go for help, and we want to increase the access to services and supports for victims. So by putting them all in one space, we're increasing their access to those services. We are a confidential service provider, so all of our staff are domestic violence counselors. We provide a 40-hour training per the evidence code to be able to certify our staff and provide comprehensive but confidential services to victims of domestic violence. Some of our partners are also sexual assault counselors and or human trafficking caseworkers. All fall within similar definitions of confidentiality, but we do try to be extremely mindful that not all of our partners are confidential. We do have some government agencies, some other community partners that don't have the same level of confidentiality as our services. And so we want to be mindful that the survivor gets to decide who knows their story and when and for what purpose. And so we do often have to tell people, we're not at liberty to discuss those details. Next slide. We do it with a number of community partners. I know Shelter's logo is on there somewhere. But our services, and as a family justice center, we couldn't survive without our community partners, because we are trying to put them all in one space and all with the point of connecting survivors more quickly and more intimately than they could have if they just walked through the door and filled out 15 different intakes. So some of these service providers are on site for us. So we have Partners Against Violence, the Rape Crisis Center out in the desert region inside of our Indio facility. We have the Riverside Area Rape Crisis Center, which is now NORA, inside of our Riverside facility, as well as the entirety of the Riverside City Police Department's Domestic Violence Detective Unit is in our facility in Riverside. We also have Adult Protective Services, Child Protective Services. We're really trying to provide those comprehensive services by co-locating partners, so that if we have a question about whether something's been reported to law enforcement or Child Protective Services, we can just go ask with the survivor's consent, right? Rather than making those calls, sitting on hold, and doing all of that. We also work with a number of community businesses like Home Depot, Starbucks, In-N-Out, to really, in order to protect survivors in their community. We want people to know about us before they ever need us, rather than finding out about us as they are experiencing a situation. Our mission is very long. And so what I like to tell people is I break it down into those 3 pieces: safety, stability, and hope. And really what we do for safety services, next slide, are quite a few things. We do needs assessments with survivors. We do the case management that we talked about. We also do the danger assessments that Angelina mentioned, where we're asking survivors and assessing their safety on a recurring basis. We also, one of our most requested services are restraining orders. With a staff of about 20, we do about 1,500 restraining orders a year. And that's a huge undertaking. They take a very long time to complete. But our goal is to keep survivors safe and to keep them safe in their own homes when we can, and provide that safety in public spaces. We also do offer some emergency hotel placements depending on funding and our ability to secure that safety for survivors. And then we do have a safe house that we manage, next slide, called Allie's House. And I'm not going to read this to you, I promise. But in Mother's Day weekend of 1993, Allison Mary Jacobs, which is the young lady pictured there, was killed in a domestic violence dispute with her then ex-boyfriend. She had done pretty much anything anybody would have wanted her to do. She had a restraining order. She left. She got a new apartment. She was away from the abuser and that situation. And he showed up Mother's Day weekend to talk to her, was causing a scene outside of her apartment. So she let him in because she didn't want to be evicted from her apartment for that noise complaint. And so by the time neighbors called law enforcement, Deputy Kent Hindergart, who's also pictured here, had responded to the scene by himself. And he was the first Temecula-based law enforcement officer that was killed in the line of duty in 1993. And so it was a huge loss for the community. We lost both Allison Mary Jacobs and Deputy Hindergart at the hands of that abuser, who then ended up harming himself as well. But our goal with Allie's house is that it's not a staffed house. So contrary to things like shelter, we don't put staff in that house. It's a one family at a time facility, and it has 5 beds. We can house families there for up to about 30 days. And our goal is to provide a locked down facility, essentially, so that survivors who are at high risk can escape that situation while they work on other temporary housing like shelters, transitional living, finding a friend, moving out of state, that kind of thing. While clients are in Allie's house, they do get access to toiletry items, gas, food. Our advocates do go out there at least once a week to do in-person case management because we do want to reduce, similar to shelter, the amount of times they have to leave the home, right? Because that increases their safety risk. Next slide. I like to tell people that the last 2 pillars of our mission is tied together. Stability and hope, you typically can't have one without the other. And so we do provide domestic violence education classes, women's aftercare support program. We also do a number of youth-based services. So we have an outreach and prevention team with the DA's office that goes into schools doing presentations, doing attendance review team meetings, trying to identify any kids who are missing school and why they're missing school and how to get them connected. We know school is one of the safest places for kids to be, particularly when there's violence at home, right? And so we want to make sure kids are attending school on a regular basis and getting that level up that they can through education. We also offer a police activities league, which is a program that's group-based mentoring for local youth with local officers, doing community service, learning about courage, honesty, integrity, and those key character strengths. And we've recently, in the last 2 years, started spreading that throughout the county. We have about 250 kids enrolled at any given time doing exposure activities. So we took them to a Padres game. We've taken them to Washington, D.C. We really want the kids to be developing into young leaders and being good citizens in their community. We also offer diversion classes for teens, which is essentially substance use, anger management. We want to interrupt that cycle of violence in kids at an earliest stage as possible. So we want to prevent them from entering that juvenile justice system. And the way in which we do that is education. We want to educate the kids on what is currently happening, what would happen if they did that at 18 versus at 15, 14, and how to get around those. We teach them coping skills, different strategies for reaching out for support. And in the last year, we launched Camp Hope, which is the first evidence-based camp for kids impacted by abuse and trauma. And we took 33 kids out to San Bernardino Forest and did a week of camping with them that's curriculum-based and learning about themselves, learning about the way in which we can help them get past that traumatic experience and really live into their values. Next slide. We also do a number of community events. So these are some of our youth program participants doing community service. We took them to a Clippers game, interacting with the officers. I like to tell people about the left-hand side picture of that officer stacking the cups. She was very engaged, but she was also battling 7-year-olds. So like the goal was to get them to stack the tallest tower. She beat them. She's taller. It's cheating, but she was very engaged. So I like to share about that picture. We also do events, like our Police Activities League does a Palentine event where all the kids come learn about teen dating violence and do Valentine Day crafts. They go to museums, they do a trunk or treat every year. So we're really just trying to get them exposed to their community so that they know what the community has to offer. Next slide. We also do a number of trainings like this one, community tabling, holiday assistance. We do Thanksgiving and Christmas gifts, as well as sometimes random holidays like Easter and Mother's Day, and depending on our donations. And then we also offer our 40-hour training, which is our domestic violence counselor training to the public. We also offer these presentations as well as presentations on specific topics about our different crime types. The last slide here has all of our social media accounts as well as our different office locations. So we are in downtown Riverside, right behind Old Town in Temecula, as well as in Indio as well, next door to the DA's office. So anybody who has, any needs can reach their regional center, but we're all interconnected, which is unique about us. So if you call the Temecula office and you need to be seen in Indio, we're very interconnected and can make that transfer happen pretty quickly. That is the end of our presentation. We made it and we did it in an hour. Look at us go. But I think we're going to open up to questions now. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so.
Yes, that is correct. Well, first of all, I would just like to start off by saying thank you to both Marshall and Angelina. I know that this topic is certainly, a tough topic to discuss. However, it is absolutely necessary, and we are grateful for partners like yourselves that can come and make this an easy thing to talk about, amongst like our partners and service providers and all that. Because at the end of the day, it's absolutely necessary. It definitely makes us do our jobs better. But it's also important for the clients, for the victims, and all that. So thank you guys, very much. I appreciate you guys, for taking the time to present on this. And yes, so as you mentioned, I will now open it up for Q&As. So I did see that Julie and Mariana had dropped it in the chat, and I know that those were answered. I don't know if Julie or Mariana, I don't know if you guys had any follow-up questions or if you guys are good. Perfect. Okay, so I'm seeing, okay, cool. I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay, great. So I don't know if there's anybody else with questions. Feel free to just come off mute or raise your hand. We'll open it up for you guys.
I think Mariana had a question that she wanted to ask. She said, do I type it?
Oh, sorry, Mariana, you can just come off mute if you'd like.
Hey, thank you. Yes, so I have a question in regards to providing transportation to students that are in a DV shelter with their parent. Would we have to organize, connect with the shelter and identify a safe place to pick up the students from, or are we allowed to pick up the students from their doorstep? What would be best practice?
So you're looking to pick them up to take them to school,
To
or?
school, yeah. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. Yeah.
Yes. So with our shelter program, our clients all go to school locally, and we work with the school district, and they provide transportation for the families. If they don't have transportation, like the school bus can't pick them up or they're not eligible for that service, which by being in a shelter they are, there is a safe location that you would be able to meet the family at, that we would work with the case manager or myself to set that up, and they would be picked up from that location. You could not pick them up directly in front of the home, because that
Okay.
is confidential. So they would have to get to the safe location, and then from that safe location, they could be picked up from there.
Thank you.
But it has to be coordinated through staff, because we want to make sure that whoever's picking them up is also safe.
Exactly. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome, thank you. So I did have a question. You know what? I'll let Chief Rogan go first. Sorry, go for it, Chief.
Thank you guys for the presentation as well. I work for the HOPE program here in Riverside County. I was wondering if you could shed some light on what takes place after clients are there for 30 to 60 days that you mentioned in terms of your discharge
Okay.
plan.
Okay. We do have you're welcome, and thank you so much for that question. That's a really great question. We have a shelter director and a case manager that works with the families. Upon entry, after the first 72 hours, Then we start doing the what we call exit plan or discharge plan with the family. So we try to identify, is there a safe family to go to? Do they want to relocate out of the area? What are their resources? And we start doing that. We are part of the DV Collaborative. So we are part of that program where they do fill out the VSBDAT and get into the CES system with the county so that they can get on the housing programs. We do work with DPSS with their housing programs as well. So we try to connect them with housing resources. We do work with all of the other shelters. So some of them end up transitioning to Martha's or CVRM for their women's and family program where they can stay longer. We also work with other DV agencies that offer transitional housing. So if that's something they're interested in, then we start that application on day 3 of entry. Why do we wait for 3 days? Because the first 3 days are the most dangerous, and that is what we use for their we call it quarantine time at our facility. So they are on quarantine for the first 3 days where they do not communicate with anyone outside of shelter. They are there for safety, healing, and protection. And there's a difference between safety and protection. We want them to start getting acclimated to being in the home. We give them those days to decompensate, seek any medical treatment that they need, and really decide, is this the place we want to go? So on day 3, they meet with staff and they make sure that that is the first thing we do. You're here, you've had 3 days to think about it. What are you thinking about? Here are your options. We do not discharge the street. So if their 60 days is coming up and we're aware we don't have a solid plan for them, we start making sure we do. And again, everything is voluntary participation. So if they don't want to work with us, then there's very little we can do, but we make sure that before their 60-day ends, that we know where they're going or they know where they're going. And again, if they choose to leave, we can't hold them, but we make sure when they do leave that they're leaving safely. So they don't leave in the middle of the night or wee hours of the morning. If there is some issues and we feel the children will be in danger with them leaving, we will let them know that we will contact Child Protective Services and work with them to contact Child Protective Services, so at least they have continuing resources. But we do not discharge to the street. We've had clients stay with us 120 days to figure out what to do. We also make sure that we can allocate funding either through our grants or private donors to help relocate them. We actually helped one family go to Arizona, and one of our donors donated the the bus fare because she went on the Greyhound with her children to Arizona to go and be with family. And that worked out really, really well. So we do not discharge the street, and we do work with them on an exit discharge plan. I hope that answered your question.
Awesome. Angelina and Marshall. So my question was, I don't know if you folks are familiar. So we now have a couple of drop-in centers under the YSHP grant throughout our county, and I was, wondering, given that our youth system of care is now, up and running, and our drop-in centers are experiencing, a little bit more traffic. When it comes to situations like this, like if a client, the youth client, were to come in and they're experiencing TB at their place of residence, how like what would you recommend? The case manager or peer support specialist or anything like that, the staff. What would you recommend to them, like how to go about like making the referral process and all that? And usually, how long does it take from the referral process to like intake to be placed into shelter, like the ones that you guys listed on here?
Marshall, if you don't mind, I'll field that because I know you do have the home as well. With us, depending on what they're looking for, again, it's all volunteer participation. So they have to agree, they have to want the services. So we would want the referral to be made either through the hotline or through our main office. So that they can actually speak to a worker. The best way would be to call the hotline and say, hey, I'm calling from, the youth program. We have an outreach center. We have someone here that's in need. They should be there when you call so that they can speak directly to our staff. Sometimes they'll speak to me, sometimes they'll speak to the case manager. If I'm available, I'd like to do a lot of the um, I don't like to. I get the opportunity to answer the hotline when we're short staffed. So they sometimes will speak to me and we'll find out what their situation, what are their options. Is our shelter the one that is for them? We do not do an intake if we don't have space. We're going to be honest. We let them know we don't have space right now. Would you like us to refer you to another location? Um, if we do have space, we will do the intake right then and there. They have 24 hours from the time they complete the intake and agree to our program to enter. So they can schedule to come in the next day, or they can say, hey, I need to take care of some things. Can I come in on Friday or can I come in on Tuesday? And then we tell them what the process is so that they can go to our safe location and from that safe location be transported to our shelter or follow staff to the shelter if they're bringing their own vehicle. Um, with the youth, we do not take anyone that is under the age of 18 as a client. They have to be an adult, so 18 and older. If they're coming with their parent, we take youth up to age 17. And we will make exceptions if they're going to be 18 in 2 weeks. Then we work with the family on that because they're still a dependent of the primary victim. So the primary victim will be the client. So that
Got it.
address, and I
Yes,
don't know if
yes.
Marshall wanted to add some more to that too.
And I did have another follow-up, and I know that you had listed here that one of the barriers are like, pets, and in most cases, the client is reluctant on it, entering into shelter. That means that their pet can't come along. Do you guys make an exception for like ESAs or um
We just don't have the facilities and the insurance requirements to take in
mhm,
the pets. What we do is we work with Animal Samaritans, Loving All Animals and Palm Springs Animal Shelter to see if we could get the pet fostered. If it's a
mhm,
service animal, then we refer them to shelters that do take the service animals. Because there are a few in San Bernardino and Orange County that are well equipped and will meet them at a safe location and transport them to their facility with those service animals.
got it. Awesome. Thank you, Angela.
You're
So
welcome.
there is another question from Julie Hirsch in the chat. So the question says, if we are working with a client for services other than domestic violence, and while working with the client, they informed us that they are experiencing domestic violence. If the client is not at a place where they are asking for assistance or ready for any change at this time, is there anything that we can and or should do regarding the client's safety?
If they're not ready for shelter, you can always give them the number and let them know there is availability. There's options for you that when you're ready to leave, you can call for shelter, or you can even give them our counseling center number or our office number so that, hey, maybe you want to talk to a counselor there. And we do have individuals that come in for case management and therapy and even support group that are still in the active relationship, learning how to get out. And then we do safety planning with them. So we can help them with a safety plan on how to stay safe if they're in that situation and what their options are to exit safely as well. So we do that. Always let them know, you know what, we're concerned about you, we care about you. There are some options for you. Here are some resources. And just letting them know that you hear them, you believe them, and that there's help available is the step in the right direction. At least that's been my experience. Marshall?
Yeah. And I think the most important part and the two pieces I will add to that is one, always giving them the resources that are available to them, because oftentimes they don't know about us until they need us. I think that's the same for shelter. And it's always better to provide the resource and they decline it than not provide the resource because they said they weren't ready for it. Because oftentimes we have survivors who decline services on the first phone call and call back 2 or 3 days later, 3 weeks later, because they've been educated on what that might look like, or they might have a question. And it's always good to have that established sense of care. And then for safety planning, I like to tell other professionals that like please leave it to the DV staff to do that. It can be really, really dangerous to safety plan with a survivor that you're not the most trained on domestic violence, because you recognizing that there needs to be a safety plan means there probably should be a domestic violence advocate involved. though we've seen so many high risk cases as of late in particular, that it can be really dangerous to attempt to safety plan without the education behind that.
Great, thank you, folks.
I
And then
agree totally, Marshall. Thank you for pointing that out. And then there was another question about self-referral. Most of our clients are self-referral. They Google us and they find us, or they go to social media and they see a post. So we always want to speak to them directly. So self-referrals are great. Sometimes the referrals come in from law enforcement or other programs because they didn't know we existed, and that's how the resources are shared. So yes, they can self-refer those.
Yeah, same for the Family Justice Center. We do receive referrals from other community partners, hospitals, law enforcement, the court, all of those different avenues, but they can self-refer into our program as well. I think the most common thing with domestic violence services in general is that they just have to identify as a domestic violence survivor or victim, and that's how we go. That's how we base our services off of, and that's pretty consistent throughout service providers for domestic violence, because some survivors never go to law enforcement. Some survivors never go to the court. Some survivors just don't. They opt into different parts of services that can be offered to them based on what's safe for them to do so.
great, thank you, Marshall and Angelina. Are there any other questions from anyone? Julie, go ahead, Julie.
Thank you. Marshall, with Safe Family Justice, I believe in the past there was in Coachella Valley apartment complex that I think was working with Safe Family that sort of held units for domestic violence victims. Is that still in play?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
I've been the executive director for the past year, and been with the organization for about 5, and that hasn't been in place for quite some time. It's something that all of our resources continuously change, which is why we love doing these presentations.
Thank you.
And we are working with the cities and the county to help new developments identify special units for special populations. So we are working on trying to find some units that will be solely set aside for victims of crime. So those are in the work over the next few years. Again, it's up to the developer and the funding, but that is the case. I've been with Shelter from the Storm going on 13 years, and it's been a while since those units have been available. That funding stream changed, that resource changed, the landlords changed, so those kind of went away, but the individuals that were housed there remained there for a few years. Are they still there? I'm not sure, but some of them did remain in those units.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions from our participants?
And I did want to share a way that we can all be involved for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I apologize, I did not have the flyers and information available when we were getting the presentation together, because we just recently launched this. For Domestic Violence Awareness Month, Shelter from the Storm does what we call Purple Thursdays. So on Thursdays, we wear purple in honor of those that didn't make it, and to support those that are still in the struggle and receiving services, so that the conversation can get started. I can't speak anymore. I don't know if I need more coffee or I need less coffee. I'm not sure. So I apologize about that. So on October 16th is National Wear Purple to Work Day. So we and support and give back to domestic violence. So we have jumped on that bandwagon, and on October 16th, we're asking everyone to wear some kind of purple to work. And if possible, go to our website or our social media and click the link to support and do a donation to keep our services going. Those monies will go to general funds for most needed items and services. And it would be just to start the conversation. So if you can challenge your team to see what team and what department wears the most purple, that'd be great. And it's just a way to get the conversation started and show people that domestic violence is something that we're giving a voice to. We're not going to be silent about it anymore. And the date is October 16th. It's the third Thursday in October, I think. Is that right?
Yes, you're correct.
Yes, it's the third Thursday in October, October 16th. And if you want, you can tag us on social media, on our Facebook or Instagram with pictures of your team wearing purple to support survivors. And it's called Wear Purple to Work Day. And if you go to our social media and our website, you will see the flyers you can download. And the photos that you can share so that you can share with your friends and family and loved ones. So we'd love to see you all in purple on October 16th. So cheap plug, took advantage of the opportunity. So that's one way you can give back and support.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I, for one, will be wearing purple on October 16th, so I'll definitely let everybody in the office know as well. Do we have any other questions? All right, so I'm not seeing any. So again, both Marshall and Angelina, thank you, both very much for taking the time and joining us and presenting, this topic to our partners. We greatly appreciate, all the work that you guys do and, just your dedication. So, yes, I agree with Maribel. It was a great presentation. So, thank you guys very much. We will be providing, like I said, the recording on our website. It's linked directly to our COC YouTube page. So you can find it at rifcohws.org slash OHS. Sorry, I'm losing it as well, Angelina. So
Contagious.
so yeah, and then we will also be sure to upload these slides onto our Google Drive for your convenience as well. So if you folks have any questions, if you guys have any challenges, getting the recording and all that, please feel free to email us at coc@rifco.org, and we'll be happy to help you out. So again, our upcoming webinar, next monthly webinar, will take place on November 5th, and the topic will be on runaway youth in honor of Youth Runaway Month. So we look forward to having you all attend that, and we very much look forward to seeing you all on November 5th. So with that said, I will give you guys about 40 minutes back of your time, and I hope you guys enjoy your lunches. Again, I'll stick around for like a minute or two, but you guys are free to go. So thank you guys for attending today, and we'll see you at the next one.
And thank you for having us.
you.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you.